Good morning or good afternoon, whatever time it is from wherever you're joining us. A huge welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Pride Distilled is brought to you by Distillery. We're an international creative practice, but more about us later. Thank you for joining in. Today, we're going to be looking at this year's Pride campaigns. We're going to be looking at what worked, what didn't work, and a whole lot more. But before I introduce our guests today, I think it's worth mentioning that while promoting this event, we've had a whole bunch of hate. I think it's more important than ever that we're having these discussions and we're really getting out of our echo chamber. So today, I'm going to encourage you to please use the chat function. Please ask us questions as we go along. We'll be highly moderating the session for obvious reasons, but we'd love to get your thoughts, your questions, and your involvement. And we'd love it if you could share this live stream on your socials as well. So, hello, my name's Steve Ween. I'm the global CEO of Distillery. And as I mentioned, we're an international creative practice who work with a whole range of organizations to provide marketing services. We're really excited that one of our recent campaigns, Queer Joy, picked up Best Purpose Award at the Alliance of Independent Agency Awards recently. And we put so many of our learnings into practice for our project with YouTube that we'll share in the description below. I've also run the Advertising Awards for over 4 years, and advertising lobbies the advertising and marketing industry to be more inclusive and make more inclusive work for the LGBTQ+ community. During that time, I've seen and heard so much great work come out of the UK and, of course, abroad, and harnessing those learnings and sharing those learnings is something I'm incredibly passionate about. But that's enough about me. It's enough about Distillery. Let's get to our amazing panel today. So we've got Sarah Garrett, who is the CEO of the British LGBT Awards. We've got Rich Miles, who is the CEO of the Diversity Standards Collective. And we've got Alex Gubbert, who also joins us from the Diversity Standards Collective. I'm going to ask you guys, let's kick off. Sarah, wonderful to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit more about the British LGBT Awards?
Yeah, so we actually celebrated our 10-year anniversary this year. So,
Awesome.
And before that, we were doing magazines. So we've been working in the gay and LGBTQ arena for quite some time, and working with obviously different agencies around different brands and stuff as well, who partner with us on our projects. So yeah, you can find out more about British LGBT Awards. There's loads of categories if you want to nominate. We're opening nominations in a couple of months. Thanks.
Awesome. There may or may not be a link underneath this video when we post it online. Thanks so much again, Sarah, for joining us today. Rich, can you tell us a little bit more about the Diversity Standards Collective?
Yes. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm the CEO of the Diversity Standards Collective. We are a cultural research network. We specifically kind of do research within the advertising and marketing space, looking at the life cycle of a brief and really making sure that the exact community and part of the community that you need to speak to, you can conduct your research with. We've been running for about 3.5 years now. We've worked with some really amazing brands like Netflix. We recently did the E45 campaign that won the Channel 4 Diversity Award, and some Mirror on the Industry research for the trans community. We also won a British LGBT Award last year with the Virgin Atlantic work we did. So it's a nice moment to meet Sarah and speak to you and yeah, celebrate all of that.
Amazing. And while you're the CEO, obviously we've got the smarts behind the business. Alex on the call is
the muscle. Is that what we're saying? Cool.
I will.
Yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Alex. Yeah. So I head up our culture research practice really. So and in reality, what that means is creating opportunities and platforms for different communities to speak. Quite often when we have creative briefs and things, it might be people like me writing an ad, and I'm not, part of many communities. So how do you actually connect to those people directly? How do you ensure that their stories, their perspectives, their cultural contexts, their community understanding history is presented and accessed in the right way. And you can do that through a range of different ways. So, we speak to people, we run surveys and things. So my job is really to create these opportunities to connect brands with people directly. And I'm just the middleman. But yeah, that's kind of how I fit in as the muscle here at the DSC.
Amazing. And I think that element of connection is really going to be a theme, I think, that runs right through today's session. As we've structured the session today around a few different discussion points. We're going to look at what didn't work last year, what campaigns are working this year, and some trends and predictions of what we think will be working in the future. And just a little reminder, again, we'd love to hear your thoughts, get your input. So please do use the chat function if you're on YouTube. Just add it to the live comment stream. And if you're on LinkedIn, you can just add it in the comments under the video and they'll pop up, and we'll moderate those questions, and we'll feed them through to the panel. And love a curly question or two for the panel. Come on, let's get them going. So let's have a look back to 2023. Let's really paint the picture of where we're at. I set up this chat with, a whole lot of hate that we got while we're promoting even this live stream. Alex, I want to turn to you about what didn't work in 2023, bearing in mind the sort of the current state of play that we're in.
Well, 2023 was a weird year in many ways, I think, for marketing and ads, particularly with an LGBT lens. We saw the big Target campaign, the big Budweiser campaign, and in the US, kind of go back on their word, backtrack and renege really on quite a lot of the stuff that they did in the wake of kind of conservative anti-LGBT backlash and commentary from different groups across the state. So I think kind of for me, what I was left thinking at the end of last year was what didn't work was brands were kind of not really being authentic, and they were saying, right, it's okay when we're having great positive responses and everyone's loving the rainbow products that we're putting out, but as soon as there's a jot of potential backlash or reputational issue, not from necessarily actually having produced something LGBT coded or queer facing, but from people who are anti that, I think we were really reminded that brands have to do more to demonstrate to the community that they're really committed to this, and that this isn't just a play for that share of the pink wallet, So I think that for me, last year was particularly memorable for those elements. Obviously, tokenism and rainbow washing, just doing things in Pride Month, all of those things never work and never have worked and continue not to work. But I think last year for me was really defined by this reminder that brands have to do more, and they have to do more authentically, because we as consumers, we see right through it. And then especially when you start, moving things and changing the goalposts for yourself in the wake of backlash. So for me, 2024 was a year of budgets being squeezed, of brands having to demonstrate they're doing more. And we can talk about this together, but have all brands done that? Not really sure. So I think there's definitely been a bit of a legacy of last year's kind of tension and struggle for brands this year when it comes to kind of inclusive campaigns. That's what I've been thinking about anyway.
Yeah, sure. Sarah, would you agree with that sentiment when reflecting on 2023?
Yeah, I think we've seen, like in society in general, there's been a growing trend around cancel culture and polarization. So I would definitely agree around sticking to, like, if you've got a campaign out there, sticking to your guns. And we've seen great things like supermarkets supporting their competitors when there's been backlash and things like that around different issues around discrimination. So that's one thing. But also, just like from the perspective of LGBTQ events such as Pride, our own events as well, we've seen that backlash, and charities as well, that some of that backlash against LGBTQ and particularly the trans community has meant some brands have taken a bit of a more conservative approach and stepped back from doing some of this work and really looking at that intersectional representation where there's a little bit of risk. So I would say, like, it's still about being brave, and we're seeing some brands do really well from really challenging, that status quo and just sticking to their guns on that side of it. So it's just my bit.
Mhm. Rich, any thoughts?
I just think that we finally saw how many people have been pinkwashing for the last couple of years. I think we talk about it quite a lot about it, and some people go under the radar, some brands don't. But because everyone was under such scrutiny, I think from the community to do better, we saw how many brands hadn't started from a very authentic place in the first place and then got scared about taking part and then didn't so this year. You had brands like Skittles who took part again, and they take part every year, do brilliant pride campaigns, and that's because they started from a place of truth, from working with the community, from learning and growing. Whereas I think a lot of, this felt like 8 years ago when we were back in advertising days when I met Steve. We were reviewing, pride campaigns and LGBT campaigns from the year, and there was real few to look through. And this kind of reminded me of that. And you look at all the brands who took part 2 or 3 years ago, and they're just not there anymore. And I think they were scared, and they were scared because there was no real robust strength for them to stand on. So no, we're here because we did this or we do this. So I think that's what really shone out to me.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, obviously, our discussion today is we're really looking at the LGBTQ plus community, but do you think that happened to other communities? Brands stepped away from supporting other diverse communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think we obviously are quite unique in the fact that because we do research across all different communities, we do see these waves of trends coming in and out of who we're researching with, and we're having to manage that internally. That sometimes we're spending 6 months talking to the disabled community or the Black community, and then suddenly the conversation just stops from brands and it moves on to somebody else. So we definitely have seen this sort of chop and change. We've had some really good research with the trans community, specifically from people like Carrot, E45, Channel 4, people really wanting to get to know that community more so they do it right. But you do see them forget and focus a budget on one, not necessarily those brands that I mentioned, but you do see a forgetful nature of one community to move on to the next, rather than this sort of a more holistic approach.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've looked back. Let's move on to what we think is working now. I think from Rich mentioned advertising, our experience working on advertising. We often see some common threads. Supporting the community, feeling real and authentic. Alex, what do you think from your perspective? Are you continuing to see those trends? Are there new things emerging?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think Rich, you mentioned a great point around Skittles, because they've kind of been doing it right. I mean, Absolute Vodka was the one that kind of started it in many ways, right, back in the day, and have been continuing to do it. And I think it's all about deliberate and kind of intentionality. I think we're gonna focus in on a couple of campaigns specifically, but I think the common throughput for me, and I won't put words in everyone watching's mouth, but it's all about proximity to the community itself. If you can genuinely demonstrate that you've actually spoken to the community, if you've actually involved them, if you've actually supported them, represented them, and if money is flowing from you back to them, then kind of representation and authenticity kind of, you don't need to talk about it because it is just real. I think that's the thing, is that it was really interesting to talk about the seasonality of campaigns. You have lesbian visibility, trans awareness, Trans Day of Remembrance, and then suddenly there's a campaign. That's how that works, and that's fine. But you think about Christmas, everyone's doing Christmas campaigns every year, but they start differently and they roll in. And I've just seen my first mince pies in the supermarket, and that's kind of 3 months in advance. So why can't we have a bit more of those stories and around the year, not just at those high points? So I think we need to go away from that seasonality a little bit, but that's kind of maybe getting ahead of myself. But I think what's working now is about how close you are to the community and really conveying in your ad that you are genuine in presenting the community as it is, not in a stereotypical way, but in kind of with real voices and real stories. And I think that's what, in the wake of last year, is going to be most effective. And if you can double down on it and say, look, we really care about this as a brand, this really matters to us internally as well as kind of externally, and I think that the community sees that, and they see through all of the kind of gumph here to the real presentation, which is that we are here, queer, etc. So I think that's really, for me, what differentiates something that's not working or didn't work last year from something that is now working more this year.
Great. Why don't we dive into some work? a good segue to have a look at some work. And the first piece I believe we're going to have a look at is actually from Macy's.
I was 13 and I was inside of the bathroom at my aunt's house, and there was a wig that she had under the sink that she wasn't wearing anymore. I ended up putting it on my head. That was the first time where I looked at myself and I was like, you are so pretty.
When I went on to a trans health day with my dad, they asked me at the front desk what pronoun pin I would like. And I was looking at all the options, and my parents were like, you can choose whatever you want. And I was like, I looked at it and I saw he, him, and I was like, yeah, this is exactly what I want.
When I was 11, I think, my mom took me to go see Love, Simon in theaters. And that was kind of my first introduction into the fact that queer people like exist. And it was kind of a moment where I was like, I can do that.
I attended my first San Diego Pride in 2019, and I made a cape for that one. And then my dad he volunteered to make this tree on my cape, which is very special to me because he was definitely probably the hardest to come to terms with my gender orientation and sexuality. When he made this piece for me, it was kind of his artistic way of saying that I love you. It's such a special moment to me because I didn't think he would express that type of love with me. During prom, it was very liberating because prom is to me, a very binary place. I was the only girl at prom that wore a suit. That was the feeling I loved because I felt like today, this is how I feel about my gender.
When I first started transitioning, I thought that I had to be a certain type of woman. Self-expression is what makes other people get a sense of who you are on the inside.
Self-expression to me means what I would like to present to the world about how I feel today. What do I want to think about today? It can be, what do I want to focus on today? Or how can I take care of myself today? I just think it's important for any queer person anywhere to feel supported and feel seen. And if I can help to do that, then that's everything.
Piece of work. Alex, I think that was your choice, wasn't it?
I love this ad. I think it's fabulous. And it's almost kind of like, I actually, Macy's, I'm sure they're wearing clothes from Macy's, but I kind of didn't care who they were, what the brand was, because I was just listening to the stories, and it was so powerful. And I think that for me is really what Pride ads are all about. It's about creating a space, strong arming it in, whether you need to or whether it naturally is something that you're thinking about. It's creating a space for real stories and real people, like the queer people that we've just heard from, the young people. They're wonderful, like wonderfully emotional, resonant, real stories. And I think if brands can leverage those effectively and authentically and genuinely, then as a queer person, I look at this ad and think, oh yeah, I'm way more likely to actually think about. I'm not sure if there's a Macy's in London, but next time I'm in New York, Rich, work trip, I'll probably go and think, oh, I remember that ad. And I think it's worth acknowledging that partnering with organisations like the Trevor Project are really important. If anyone doesn't know, the Trevor Project is amazing work with young people around mental health and suicide awareness and prevention and stuff. So connecting with the community and community-led organisations as a brand is the best way, in a nutshell, to demonstrate that it's authentic, because it is. And I think it's a really clever way of Macy's taking a back seat and saying, look, we'll just let the stories speak for themselves, and just, we're supporting this. That's it. That's all you need. There's no splashy elements to it. It's subtle and real. And I think that's what resonated with me personally.
What about from your point of view, Sarah? Did that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think the storytelling, authentic storytelling, it really works, because if you're from the same community, you can really relate to it. But it's also really educational. And what I would say as well, I would love it if there's more bravery in the UK to do stuff like this. We've seen the Virgin Atlantic ad, which wasn't quite the same sort of thing. It was more sort of a statement advert. But on the other thing you mentioned as well around supporting different organizations in the LGBTQ community, it's almost like that not being performative, and it's almost like not intuitive for brands to do, but it's doing it sort of and not shouting about it in a way. So we've seen organizations and brands like WeWork, Starbucks giving their spaces. We've seen different things happen with branding products and giving money to charity and supporting charities. And it's those things that you can have as a brand in your back pocket that, you know, actually you can say, look, if there's backlash, look, I am doing more than just putting out my brand and makeup washing.
Yeah, I think what those 3 ads you just mentioned there, of this Macy's one, the Starbucks one, and the Virgin Atlantic, all had similar sort of triangle of thought process, which was like, what's their intent, and what is the representation, what's the outcome. All of them had an outcome that was benefiting the community, from providing money to Trevor Project, from Starbucks. They created that with mermaids. They created the cookie that they then sold. So and you know, with Virgin, it was the actual policy change that changed for their workers. You know, they're not just showing people from the community, they are making sure they're making that change for it. And it can happen in different ways, from donating charity to simply changing wording in your policy. You know, that doesn't necessarily cost anything, you know, so it's like there's always a good way, the good ads find that outcome that really benefits the community.
We've seen a lot of organizations as well really connecting with the network groups in their organization, because of those people on the ground level really connected to those communities as well. So getting advice on their brands and marketing from that side. So just an idea.
Yeah, you're so right. As in, like, you have the perfect focus group internally, right, with an ERG or a network to talk to your community. You know, test your ads internally as well, but not just with people that look and sound like you. I think that's a good lesson that brands should be doing. You can always come to us and we'll help you with it as well. There you go, Rich. I've done my plug.
Thank
you very much. But jokes aside, I think it's really important to ensure that, like, you know, the creative testing point involves the community, because, you know, you can read through all of these like tokenistic things, and if you haven't connected the narrative to the community, then you've just said, okay, well, we've got a story, or we could probably just have a lesbian, that'd be fine, let's just put one of those in. You know, that's the energy that brands have had in the past, whether that's been malicious or whether it's just been a little bit myopic. You know, I think it's really important to be testing it with the community and actually centering stories on the community deliberately from the beginning, and not just as a kind of, oh, well, we could actually just have a trans person instead. No, make a trans story, make it trans first. That's that. Yeah,
great. Awesome. Just very aware of time. Shall we move on to the next piece of work?
There's no newness in sameness.
In a world that tells us who we are allowed to be,
there are those who defy those expectations.
We celebrate the beauty of being ourselves.
For our love, for our joy.
We prefer to stand out than not be seen at all.
we belong in any space.
And in every place.
We are proud to be.
I love this piece of work. I think it's fantastic. And again, Alex, I think you chose this piece.
Yeah, sorry, it feels like it's my but very quickly from my side, I think the thing that stood out for me, in addition to everything I mentioned about the Macy's ad around, showing real people and stuff, was the kind of intimacy and the kind of friendliness and the kind of, there was a real sense of kind of joyful young, that sounds so old, joyful young people, that's how I'll say it. But like, queer youth experiencing like joy, and I think there's too often there's these like negative narratives around like, well, the mental health challenges, access to, healthcare inequality and financial inequality across the community, particularly for trans and non-binary and genderqueer members of the community. But to see an ad that's kind of shoes, right? We all wear shoes, so it's a universal experience of wearing shoes, but it's told through a story that centers on kind of queer intimacy, and the visual that you see here is lovely. We can all see that, and whether we are part of the community or not, you can resonate with this sense of joyful, youthful, running through the city at night, having adventures and stuff. And I think centering these positive narratives is another thing that brands should do, is that how is your product used? There's obviously a positive expression of your product in the world, with your consumers. So center on that. If you're targeting an older demographic, we'll center it on queer elders and their stories. If you're targeting skincare, well, there's loads of things that you can do there, for example. So I think for me, it's all about intimacy, positivity, and reality and realism. So that's kind of for me what stood out as being really effective with this one.
It's kind of like it feels to me like the American version of the English McCain's chips advert. Like it's just about normal life, and then they're just kind of they kind of feel very similar, and that really connects to like a lot of the research we've been doing with like across the spectrum of the LGBT community. All, no matter if it's sort of bisexual community, transgender community, or LGBT, they're all saying kind of normalization. Like we want to be more boring and not sensationalized. And I think this proud to be, even though some people might look and be like, they're just walking on the street, or the McCain chips ad, they're just at home having a hug or whatever. Those normal moments are what we're finding are being like called out for at the moment, to be sort of the ways represented, rather than the sort of sensationalized of like sort of maybe drag or the transition journey that those communities are seeing all the time. They kind of want to normalize those. So I really liked it because of that.
Yeah, or the over sexualization of gay men. I think that's another thing that comes up. Just moving on, we've pulled out some other examples that we'll link to, from Mac to Athletic Brewery to Lime Bikes. But I thought perhaps we could look at distilling all of this down. And one of the key themes here is sort of the usualization and representation of LGBTQ plus lifestyles. And I'm going to throw to you again, Alex. I'm like a broken record.
No, it's fine. I can talk for days. I'm a bit of a talker. But I mean, Sarah, I don't know if there's anything you want to add on those the last Converse ad before I ramble on into the next section.
No, go ahead. The only thing I would touch on is thinking about, when we talk about rainbow washing, it's also demographic. So I'd say thinking about who your target audience is. It's a lot easier for Converse to put out an advert like that. It's a lot more risky for, say, a like Wix or something that has a more mainstream sort of demographic. Like
that's a really good point.
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually, I think that's probably in a way the best segue ever into this piece of research that we did. Thank you. We did a recent piece of kind of research looking at advertising, particularly in an out of home kind of setting, so billboards and digital spaces and things like that. But I think this is relevant across all types of media. So we asked the community, would you say you would consider a brand or company more when it features people from the LGBTQIA plus community? 49% of people said yes, 46% of people said maybe, it depends on the ad, and only 5% of people said no. So I read that as 95% of people would positively be influenced by seeing an ad that includes the community. Just half of those are unsure what that ad looks like, and it has to probably feel right. So I think it's so important, because it will have a tangible impact on your ability to reach and engage and drive purchasing and engagement across your demographic. And that's true of brands like Converse or like who feel very close to the LGBTQ plus community. But I think, Sarah, to your point, this is also true for companies like you mentioned Wix or other kind of brands that you would not necessarily think of as being kind of LGBT first brands, whether that's because their main audience is a straight cis white audience, or whether it's because it's a legacy brand that it feels for whatever reason. There will be LGBTQ plus people that use your brand. There'll be LGBTQ plus people you supply. There'll be LGBTQ plus people who work for you, who have queer kids or family members or friends in their network. So the LGBTQ plus community is everywhere. We touch everyone in a different, in different communities in different ways. So, every brand has the potential to speak to us, with us, or for us. And I think it's important to note that 95% of LGBTQ plus community are looking for that, and whether they realize it or not would be influenced by it. So I think it's so important that representation is done and is done right. And this is true of all underrepresented communities as well. Not just we're talking about the LGBTQI plus community today, but it's also relevant for the Black community, South Asian community, the disabled community. All of these stories that we're not necessarily seeing or expecting to see regularly on our screens or on our billboards, etc., if you're doing it deliberately, then the community will respond. And that's, I think, a good call to action for anyone on the brand side today is kind of who's your audience? Who do you think your audience is? And are you talking to the entire pie, or are you just talking to a slice?
Yeah, I think sometimes marketers, including myself, we overcomplicate that journey when we're trying to find a truth. Because realistically, like Sarah, you mentioned Wix, I think they sell tiles, right? Is that who Wix are? Yeah, that is. Not playing into a stereotype of not knowing tiles, but I just didn't know Wix. But what's interesting is I think people are like, oh, are they my audience? Should we? Let's look at some research, let's look at some detail. If you think about it, do trans people buy tiles? Do gay people buy tiles? Yes, of course they do. Everybody buys tiles. Then you want to look into it. We know that whatever happens, they buy water, they buy tiles, whatever brand you are. How and what does it mean to them is where you want to look and start digging into it. And that's when all you have to do is that kind of 1 and 2 steps. So let's start digging into like what it means or how it means something different or similar. And then you start finding these really interesting truths that then can reinforce that representation. And that will kind of flip over that amount of that community there who are just waiting to see whether or not you have thought about them at that point or not. It's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, and I think so. We've had one question. Sorry, Sarah.
Go on, just quickly. The reason why I mentioned Wix is because they got so much backlash a year ago for pushing out like a campaign, and it was almost more brave from seeing that than someone who had raised demographics. So I'm like, quick shout out and applause to Wix. Not that I'm not sponsored by them money.
You might be after this.
Yeah.
But we've had a couple of questions roll in, and one of them was we're a mid-sized business with a smallish marketing budget. Does this all apply to us?
I would say, just jump in, absolutely. You can get voices from the community at no cost and at cost, right? You can ask, like everyone was saying today, you can ask people in your team, you can ask friends and family, you can go to a research company like us, you can look at kind of all the ads that like are on British LGBT Awards website, you can see all those stuff, what's been done before. And it's just about being inquisitive. Like, and anyone and any brand, whatever size, whatever agency size you are, you can be more inquisitive to a community, and then just look at what's tangible for you to get some of the answers that you need. Would be my kind of response to that.
Yeah. Amazing.
We're just going to say that, that spend has to go somewhere. So, why it doesn't have to be this year, it could be next year. What are you doing with that spend? How are you demonstrating, or how are you committing to? You've joined this call, whoever's answered that question. So you clearly care. So you could run a free poll about your ad on LinkedIn. You could invite some people on LinkedIn for 50 quid, whatever. Come to us, come to your network and things if you want to be cheap and cheerful. But just care. Write a narrative that could be LGBT, could not be. Write an ad that has a disability, has someone with a disability, but it does so with intent. So it's not necessarily about big spends. It's about intentional storytelling and intentionally engaging with the community. If you've got an amazing trans inclusive healthcare policy at work, why don't you talk about that as well? It doesn't just always have to be like fully creative. It can also be around positive marketing around your brand and your people in your business as well. That there may be some of the unsung heroes, the unheard stories. So reflect on where you are. If you're a mid-sized business, then maybe you have a couple of hundred people. Maybe someone knows something or has a testimonial as an ally. Why don't you talk about those during LGBT History Month? So there's ways around. There's no around ways to highlight and spotlight those stories in a way that's authentic, and you just have to care. I think that's the thing. So understand your context and people first, and then see where you go from there. Would be.
Can I ask Sarah a question? Sarah, do you see in the awards every year? Do you see like small brands that people have never heard of, like come up with some big like stuff that kind of surprises everybody, or like people from certain businesses who are really big allies in that kind of section come out kind of on top when it comes to awards?
You always have sort of some companies that really want to have some motivation to drive the agenda. But I just wanted to also add, like, there is sort of, when you look at things like the census and you look at the changing demographic of Britain, you're thinking, okay, look at sort of the next generation that's coming through, like the Gen Zs, Gen Alphas that are coming through, and look at how the census trends should work in that way. I think whether you're a small business or a big business, it's really important to look at those trends and be an inclusive brand in that sense, because of it's changing so quickly. So it's just keeping a lens on that as well. To your Rich, I haven't seen like masses of innovation. I've seen some great innovation from some really big brands. It'd be great to see some more sort of brands being braver in that space, because it is about future-proofing yourself as well. So
yeah, that's a great point.
Good question.
Okay, shall we just distill it all down, Alex, and then we'll look to the future.
Sounds good. Yeah, so in terms of distilling down, these are kind of 4 things I think we know. That was where I started. Well, what do we think we know? And I think we do know these. I think this has been time and time again proven to be effective. We talked about some of these today already, in terms of, we've seen what some of the challenges from last year around marketing spend being cut and backlash and all that sort of stuff. This year, focus on community and intimacy and real stories and real people, and kind of distilling what we know works already. Is the first thing is that you move beyond stereotypes. So the LGBTQ plus community is not a monolith. I'm white and gay, and I've just got married. So I am a story that matters in the community, but I'm not the only story, nor am I necessarily particularly the campus person. You may disagree after you've heard me speak today. But, there is the big gay stereotype. That's not the only narrative that matters. Trans women of color were the people who drove the Stonewall, post-Stonewall era, Sylvia Rivera and, Marsha P. Johnson. We look at those people in our LGBT history lessons, and we thank them and we celebrate them. And yet we don't necessarily see their stories or stories like theirs, brought out in marketing. Why not? Because we're focusing on these big gay stereotypes. So we know that it's going to be more impactful to move beyond that. I think the 2 ads we saw were really good at doing that. I didn't feel they were stereotypical. I felt they were really real and resonant and centered. Also, they were quite intersectional. We had different people, we had different experiences, different race, ethnicities, abilities, disabilities, presentations, gender expressions. So I think it's important not to just sort of cookie cutter and just say, okay, well, a lesbian has to be like this, or a non-binary person has to do this. I think we can not talk about that, but really focus in on just showing a diverse, representative part of the population who is queer. All year round, I talked about mince pies, but I think it's okay to have LGBT people in your ad outside of Pride Month. Hello, newsflash. But build stories that are centered on queer experiences by design, rather than kind of shoehorning them in. And I think the final thing goes kind of all to that conversation around Target and Budweiser is be bold, be unapologetic, and showcase and celebrate queer stories without worrying too much about the reputational damage across anti-LGBTQ plus people. I think that's the most important thing. If you're going to do it, commit to it. And I think these are all things that we know. It feels like maybe you're hearing these for the first time. I hope not, but I feel like we've been talking about it in these terms for quite a long time. So I think distilling it down, these are still working and will continue to always work. But there's maybe more to the story. And I think that's probably what we need to be focusing on. If you do all of this right, then you're probably halfway there. But there's maybe just something else to think about, which is around being genuine and really caring and putting back and giving back to the community is probably the 5th thing.
Amazing. Thank you, Alex. So we're at time. So what I'd like to do is ask each of the panelists, what do you think will work next? What do you think's up next in this space? Rich?
What's next? I think from what our research shows is more boring representation. That came out of our Channel 4 Mirror on the Industry stuff. The trans community, I think we did some research with about 450 people in total, qualitative research, and they were all asking for less sensationalized representation and more boring. If you look at sort of trans representation specifically, you see a lot of the transition journey or story within ads. And to quote Danny St. James, who runs an amazing charity called Not a Phase, said, why can't we just be more boring? Why can't we just work in Tesco's in an ad? Like, why do we have to be always about this trans-centric story? So I think we're going to see a move of, we see that with all of the other communities as well, asking for, I think you called it utilization, what did you call it, normalization earlier, Steve? And it just that sort of stuff. And the next thing I hope to see is just brands being inquisitive and finding that connection. And we kind of talked earlier when we said about Wix, like find that basic connection, find what connects your community with any community, and then start interrogating it and be inquisitive. And that can be a very small scale, from, we said, a policy or a story to a big brand ad, to anything like that. So yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, Sarah, I'm going to pass to you next.
Yeah, a couple of things that, like, I've touched on it. Be brave. I think that looks different for different brands. But I'd also say as well, utilizing how we have purpose behind our brand a bit more, and working out what that looks like for the gay LGBTQ community. It could be, it can be a vast array of different things and what your brand can offer. Also, it's all a bit leading on from that authentic storytelling part, but maybe using real life representation. So, and thinking about that representation that looks at intersectionality and some of the sort of high risk. There's a safe place, I'll use the word safe again, which is like tried and tested, which is the advert for a diamond ring with 2 gay men proposing, which everyone loves and everyone's seen that now. But then there's pushing those boundaries of what is that underrepresented area of branding and advertising. So, and last one, quick. Also multi-dimensional stuff, like not just looking at one-dimensional advertising, but also looking at how that resonates and engagement in social media and different things like that with the gay community, LGBTQ community, should I say. So things like that. Done.
Amazing. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah,
Alex?
It's finding it hard to add to that. I think from a different perspective, I think the format of things is going to change. I think we're going to continue to see a lot more short form video. And I think we're going to see a lot more micro influencers and LGBTQ+ influencers being used and leveraged by maybe this mid-sized brand that's asked about this. If you don't have it in-house, then find someone in the community to be your mouthpiece. So I think we're going to see a lot more engagement with influencers, and because we know that that's a trend that we're seeing across all media, is the rise of the continued rise of the influencer in short form. So I think we're going to see brands, big brands and small and mid-sized, to be fair, all exploring that more and kind of getting stuck into that kind of format. And so I think that's going to work because it's going to feel real and unfiltered and raw and close to the community. And so, yeah, that's what I think. In addition to the amazing things that Rich and Sarah said, that's from my side, I think, what we can expect more of.
Amazing. So looking to the future, we're talking about more boring with more connection, being brave, having purpose, representation, being multidimensional, and thinking about formats and influencers.
Just a couple of things.
Just a few. Amazing. But I think that's all we've got time for. I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone for joining us today. I think that was a really great discussion. Unfortunately, we don't have time for the Q&A, but please do leave your questions and under the video, and we'll respond to them. And Rich and Alex, where can we find the Diversity Standards Collective? How can we get in touch?
You can email us at hello@thedsc.org.uk or find us on online. Don't judge our website yet; it will change in a couple of weeks. But that's www.thedsc.org.uk. Gosh,
amazing. And Sarah, how can people find out a little bit more about you and your amazing awards?
Just if you go to BritishLGBTAwards.com, we, just as I mentioned, we're opening voting. So if there are any marketing advertising campaigns which are really inclusive of our community, then please think about nominating.
Awesome. And when do nominations close? Did you say in a few months?
We're opening in a couple of months. So we'll be posting on, just follow us on LinkedIn or wherever you follow social media. You'll find out.
Amazing. We'll add all of those links below. So thank you again. Thank you. And
having us.
Follow on LinkedIn, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Cheers.